Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast. I'm your host, Shay Brown, co founder of the Bucket List Bombshells, where we serve women who are building, growing, and scaling an online service based business. Now, today I am bringing on a friend and a fellow industry member in the course creator, education, mentorship, coaching world,
Nesha Woolery.
We actually met back in Bali in 2018. So, like pre-pandemic days, living our work and travel lifestyle. And a mutual friend, Louise Henry, which many of you listeners know of, introduced us. And today, as an online business coach, she's been in business for 11 years. She has a hobby of building boats, which I think is so fun. And she went from being a waitress and retail worker to building a six-figure online business while traveling the world, and all while only working 3 days a week. So that's going to be what we are going to be diving into and talking about today on how we can structure our work weeks, our businesses to have more time freedom, which is something we talk a lot about on the podcast. Well, welcome to the podcast, Nesha. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get to have this conversation with you.
Yeah. Such a cool moment just thinking about the journey that we've both been on for the past decade. And we've kind of ended up in similar spots with wanting and craving more time freedom without sacrificing, the revenue within our business. So before we dive into all of that and your full story, can you tell us a little bit more about the business that you own and maybe the services and products that you offer?
Yeah, sure. So I own an online coaching and education business where I help online service providers or those who aspire to make a full-time income without working full-time hours or burning out. Because I think for a lot of solopreneurs, they find themselves starting their business for freedom, and then they get the location freedom, they get the financial freedom. But what often happens, or what I see happen, is that they don't quite get the time freedom or the mental freedom because they feel chained to their laptop, or they feel like they're spending all of their time trying to create Instagram content that gets seen by 20 people. And they end up sort of living up to that saying that I'm sure we've all heard, that entrepreneurs will work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40 for somebody else. And that's a shame because that's not the reason a lot of us started our businesses. We started our businesses for freedom, not to be chained to the business or stressed out every day. So I really help solopreneurs combat those things. And I do that mainly through my courses. So I've got Simple Sales School, which is my sales and marketing course. It's all about a simple framework for booking clients consistently and scaling to 5K months. And then I've got Organize and Automate, which helps online service providers organize their business in 14 days on the side of their regular routine. So I've got those two as like my main courses, and I sell some other things as well.
Yeah, amazing. I love that. And that's really the two areas that we're really going to dive into today around our schedules, around how we can really structure that work week. Because I think to some people, it's like, especially as entrepreneurs, no matter what stage, it's like, wait, 3-day work weeks? Can I really do that? So I'm even excited to hear your advice today. So I'm kind of thinking about some of our listeners who are in different stages of business. Can you share like your journey and the evolution? So 11 years is a long time to be in business. And I'm curious how your business has changed from the beginning, maybe what you were offering to what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's such a long time. I feel like a grandma
Me
in
too.
terms of business years. I really do. But yeah, I started out in 2012 when I was 18 years old. So I was quite young when I first started a business, and it was a web and graphic design business. So at the time I was a waitress and I also worked in retail. I knew I didn't want to do those things for the rest of my life, but I also didn't go to college. So um, I felt very much so like I knew what I didn't want to do, but I wasn't quite sure what I did. And I fell into web and graphic design sort of accidentally, and then that became my business. I managed to grow that to a point where I could make a full-time income and quit my 9 to 5 jobs. And then over time, I never if I'm being really honest, I never really felt very confident as a designer. Whereas I felt very confident the more that I grew my business, I felt very confident in the marketing side, in the systems side, just in business in general. And because of that, I veered towards creating content about business and not so much about design because it was what my heart was really in. Um, so I ended up building a community of other freelancers and designers through my content. And I just pivoted then from being a designer to being a business coach and to selling digital products. I sold a membership, I've sold ebooks, courses, all the things. So, yeah, I ended up pivoting mostly finally into online courses. That's where I've made the majority of my income over the last 11 years. But
Yeah.
it's been a journey to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so funny
Yeah.
too, as digital product creators trying literally every different type and then kind of
Oh
finding
yeah.
your sweet spot. For Cass and I, we've actually now fully transitioned into like coaching programs. So some are
Yeah.
hybrid with corset, like lesson content, and coaching. And then we have like masterminds and higher touch point group coaching programs. And I think it's just so fun as an entrepreneur to be able to pivot that way and just figure out what
Mm.
types of products and services you want to create, you want the ways that you want to serve your audience. And that can change over many, many years over time with the industry, with what you want, with what your audience wants. Like our audience is really craving that high touch point option.
Yeah.
So I just love hearing the journeys of other entrepreneurs and kind of how we get from point A to point B. Because I started as a social media manager. I was not very good at it. And it was back in the day of like what even is a social media manager. And now to look at where I am now, it's just so cool. And I really hope those on the journey can like know that over the course of 10 years, it can look completely different. And it doesn't always have to be what you started in as well. Just follow your passions.
Yeah, I love that you made that point. I always say to my community, because my community are often either new to business or they have a business, but they are below 5 to 10K months. And one of the things that they get really hung up on is niching down or choosing a niche. And I always say, you're not choosing a forever niche, you're choosing a for now niche. Because one thing we can all guarantee is that our businesses are going to evolve and change, like you said, over time. And that's natural and that's normal. Obviously, we don't want to keep like changing every few months,
And of course, yeah,
but
yeah.
but it's naturally going to evolve over time. So don't put all this pressure on yourself to really nail your forever niche and don't like pressure yourself to try and find the perfect niche that you can imagine yourself sticking with for the next like decade or the rest of your life because that just usually doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that because we also have that every time we have the beginners coming in
Yeah.
and they are so hung up on getting like choosing a niche and choosing their service offering as if
Yeah.
that's like their thing that they're going to do for the rest of time.
Yeah.
And I think it's because a lot of the women in our community are coming from a 9 to 5, which I'm assuming is probably in your audience. And in
Yeah.
that typical career path, you kind of have to decide because then that's how you get promotions. That's how you can move companies. You're kind of stuck in a little bit of one path. And it's breaking that mentality and being like, no, you own the business. You are the decision maker. And yes, we need to find some form of someone to speak to. So, like maybe it's an industry and they have multiple, pillars or categories under there, like health and wellness could be an industry. And then you have, your acupuncturists, you have your coaches, you have your nutritionists under there to target. Like it doesn't have to be so specific in the beginning. And then it can also evolve and change over time as well. Exactly what you were saying. And I think people get really hung up on that in the beginning. So that was awesome advice. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No
Yeah.
worries.
So, kind of going into our main topic today, this working this 3-day work week. I think it sounds like something that so many people want and they strive towards, but they're really just not sure, I think, how to make that transition or even to maybe set their business up from the start like that. So, I'm curious, did you start your business always working a 3-day work week or did that evolve over time?
Yeah, I did. I started out working 3 days a week because I just had all these other things that I wanted to do. I mean, I think that everyone is multi-passionate. I know that some people think that it's only a certain amount of people. I think everybody is multi-passionate, myself included. And I had all of these different things that I wanted to do. I had volunteer work I wanted to do. I wanted to travel, just do all of this stuff. So for me, I started out working 3 days a week. There are definitely seasons though that which is what I always like to make sure that people are aware of. There are definitely seasons where I do work 5 days a week, such as launch seasons. So if I'm going to be launching something, my mastermind launches like twice a year, for instance, then around then I will work 5 days a week. Or there's other times like my content batching week where I will typically veer more towards 4 days a week or 5 days a week in that week of the month. So there are seasons when I do work more than three, but most of the time it's always been 3 days a week. There was a kind of like a pivotal moment though where I did end up, when you get carried away with your friends, your business friends, and their goals, and I found myself, yeah, I found myself sort of hearing all of these goals and what their work weeks looked like, and I think I allowed it for a period of time. This was quite a few years ago, where I think I just allowed myself to get caught up in that and tell myself that that's what I should be doing as well. And that's how I should operate my business. And so I fell back into hustle culture for quite some time. And I really burned out. I really, really burned out. Even though it wasn't for very long, really. I would say I was in that way of working and that mindset for maybe about 6 months. And then for 2 years, I just didn't feel creative. Like I felt like I lost all sense of creativity. I can remember I would always just want to be outside. Like I never wanted to work. I never wanted to be inside. Sometimes sitting down at my laptop, I would just have this really strong urge to cry, or I would cry. And I would just feel like I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't sit at my desk and work at my laptop, which is kind of crazy. Um, so yes, I think I went through that for a while, and it just reiterated to me that actually the way that I was working before was the best way for me. And sometimes you have to block out the noise of what everyone else is doing or what they tell you you should be doing, what goals you should be aiming for, how you should work, and work
Yeah.
in the way that is best for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And that word should, I feel like,
Yeah.
is just like, let's get rid of that. I know it's so hard, but we always, no matter what stage of business, I feel like there's always kind of like someone that you can look to, or
Yeah.
there's something that you're saying, well, maybe, maybe I should do it that way. But kind of coming back and checking in with yourself and making sure it feels good for you. And thank you for sharing that story. I think it's something like I definitely went through something similar where I was just feeling so burnt out from my business. And for me, it was because I was so disconnected from actually working with my audience, working with my community, because I became the
Yeah.
COO and the running like the whole back end of the business. And like the hustle culture caught up with me, the wanting more and more and more. Like it just felt like
Yeah.
nothing was ever enough. And I lost that passion. And that moment was so disappointing to me because I created a business to feel freedom, fulfillment, and all of these things. And I did not feel that way anymore. And so that's when we made a change. So thank you for sharing your story as well. It sounds like a similar journey.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing yours as well, because I can totally relate to that too. I think sometimes you can get to a point where you've stopped doing the things that you enjoyed in the beginning, and now you're just doing the CEO tasks. And if that was never why you started your business, sometimes that can get a little bit, deflating. And I think I don't know what the saying is, but I know that I've heard it somewhere that you get burned out when you're not necessarily because you're doing too much, but because you're doing too little of what lights you up. And yeah, your story just really reminded me of that saying and how true it is. And I think a lot of us don't realize that.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm curious in your approach to helping online service providers, you're really emphasizing the power of content in attracting consistent clients. Could you elaborate on how you've streamlined the content creation to be effective, efficient, kind of boring words, but let's just use them in this in this context, just to make sure that we're like, how does it not consume those 3 days? when it comes
Mm.
to creating content. Because for me, I'm like, I need like at least a full day. And then I'm thinking like all the other things I need to do in the week.
Yeah, I completely get that. I think that for me, and I think it would be the same for a lot of solopreneurs, instead of trying to make content one day a week or trying to do it every single day, I find like a lot of solopreneurs will try and make an Instagram post every day. Sometimes like I end up getting into that routine too if I haven't done my content batching for that month. But instead, if you can batch your content in like for Instagram, if you're only creating Instagram content, you're someone who's listening and that's the only content that you create, then you can create your content in 3 days a month if you have a system in place. And as long as you have a system in place for batching that content, you can spend 3 days a month on that content, and then you don't have to think about it again for the rest of the month. So for me, I find that really helpful with Instagram and also with my podcast. So I will aim to have a content creation week once a month where I aim to record 4 podcast episodes and I try and keep them pretty short, to be honest. If it's just me, unless if it's an interview, it will be longer. But if it's just me, sometimes I've tried to record 10-minute episodes, 15-minute episodes. I'm really striving to stick to that time frame because that really helps me with my workload. But yeah, I'll do a content batching week and I'll aim to record my 4 podcast episodes for the month ahead. And then I also aim to create as much Instagram content as I can. And what I do with my Instagram content is I'll try and repurpose. So I think sometimes solopreneurs think that they have to constantly churn out new content instead of thinking a little bit creatively and repurposing what you have. Because you could repurpose one post into 7 different posts. You could just, yeah, you could use the same video, but change the hook and change the caption. Or you can turn a reel into a carousel. So there are all these different ways that you can repurpose your best content. So, what I'd like to tell my clients and students to do is if you aim for 4 posts per week and you're repurposing 2 of them, that means that once a month you only have to create 8 new posts, which is very, very doable. You're going to be repurposing 8 as well, but that takes half of the time. So, repurposing is a really great way to just like stay on top of your client, sorry, not client, your content creation so that it takes up way less time than it normally would.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, people think, well, if I'm taking something, repurposing it, won't someone feel like they're seeing the same content? And I would
Mm.
say, because I've got that question before, and I would say the algorithms, the chances of them even seeing the first piece of content you put out is not very high.
Yeah, yeah,
Like it is and it isn't, like depending on your content and the algorithm and all of that. But for the most part, because people are seeing so much content over and over, even in like sales funnel style, you have to give them like 7 touch points for them to feel connected or understand a topic or want to work with you. So in the same sense, when we're repurposing content, they may have not even taken away the point of the purpose of the content that you originally created. So
yeah.
repurposing it gives the opportunity for people to digest it in a different way as well.
Yeah, exactly. I say the exact same thing. And there's a statistic that I think the average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social media. So if you think of the amount of 5 to 10 second reels that someone's going to see in 2.5 hours every single day, they are very likely to have not read your caption, for instance, or to have not even seen your post, like you said. Or if they did, they likely wouldn't remember every single thing about it. Plus, repetition is actually a really great thing, as you already mentioned. So I think repurposing is very underrated.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a great piece of advice. So, moving kind of also into more habits and systems. So we know that in our community, and I'm sure in yours as well, and even probably yourself, you started the business for that freedom, that fulfillment, and then we kind of talked about this earlier. You get maybe stuck in like hustle culture or kind of trapped a little bit in the work that you're doing and losing that work life balance. So, from your experience of this, what are those like habits or maybe systems that we could implement to have that freedom, that time freedom in our business without falling into like feeling stressed of how much we might be trying to pack into those 3 days? If
Yeah, it definitely does. And I'm actually super glad that you asked this question because I have another call just after this one where we're talking all about content batching. So I would say you need three systems, one of them being your content batching system. So just have 3 days a month. Day one, you plan your content. Day two, you create the posts. And then day three, write the captions and schedule the posts. So that's all that you would need to do in like a very basic summary for a content batching system per month. I really would recommend that every solopreneur try that because it really will save you so much stress. And then the other two systems I would recommend are client process systems. So things like a client onboarding process and offboarding process. And also document your processes for each of your packages so that you have, a dedicated to-do list, email scripts for common client scenarios. These are things that it sounds kind of unimportant in the grand scheme of business. A lot of people, when they're thinking about business, they'll give their time to their marketing and so on. And obviously that's important. But when you've done the marketing, you've got the clients, if you're not organized and you don't have, client systems, client processes, then you're going to be wasting so much time and you're going to be stressing out, forgetting things fall through the cracks. Like a lot of my students have told me they've saved 10 hours a week, like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 12 hours a week, just from organizing themselves with their client processes. And then they've been able to take on multiple clients at a time and not just one to two, because now they've really got themselves together. So I would say that's a really underrated thing that every solopreneur needs to get organized. And then the final system is a project management system. And you can use a variety of tools for this. I'm not sure if you have a tool
we love
specifically.
Asana. We
Yeah.
typically love and teach Asana, but we find like people have different personality types, that work
Yeah.
styles, and that. So there's obviously loads. But I'm curious, which one do you like to recommend?
So I also enjoy Asana and I really love Notion as well. Yeah, I love both of those. So I would say have a project management system, and inside of there, make sure that you document all of your content creation processes, any batch day that you do per month in your business, and make sure that you have a project that's all about your monthly to-do list, and then a project for your weekly to-do list. Those are the two in Notion, which is what I use. Those are the two that I use every single day. And I honestly think I wouldn't be able to work 3 days a week if I did not have just those two projects in my project management system, because they really keep me on track and focused on my priorities.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've been using Asana, gosh, I think since like the very beginning. I've been using Asana
Yeah.
with my client work. I use Asana like within our business with our team, myself. I have my own little Asana board, how I manage
Yeah.
myself. And now actually a lot of our programs, we're utilizing Asana for the actual like members area. And it helps when our students or our members have like milestones that they need to hit. It's so
Yeah.
nice to use Asana with like task cards. They have Kanban styles, they have list styles, they have calendars. So highly recommend Asana. And then yeah, Notion seems to be kind of catching up and being like the newer player that sort of I've noticed people are starting to use. So absolutely,
Yeah.
as the operations girly of the business, I am like all for the SOPs, for the project management systems, because exactly like you said, that's how you're going to be able to take on more clients because you're not spending so much time in the like doing. You have things either automated or well organized. So that was great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you've only got like a very limited amount of energy per day. You don't want to be wasting that energy, especially if you're not working 5 days a week. You don't want to be wasting that energy on really pointless things like your client process and doing everything manually, sending the contract manually and sending the questionnaires manually. You can use tools like Dubsado for that, that automate that entire thing. So it's really worthwhile. I think a lot of solopreneurs hesitate to set up their systems like Asana or Dubsado or Notion, whatever it may be, because of the time that you have to put in upfront. And a lot of people will say to me, I just don't have the time. Like, I'm so stressed out or I'm so overwhelmed, I don't even have the time to do that. But honestly, if you break it down, just try and get organized in 20 minutes a day. You don't have to do it all in one go or all in one week. And once you've done it, it's going to save you hours and hours for months or years to come. So the upfront investment is really going to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, moving into another topic, which I'm sure our audience is curious about, is this reaching that 5 to 10K months in just 3 days. So, we started to kind of touch on like how are we taking multiple clients, and that's based on having good systems. But it's really impressive that you teach your students how to reach these numbers. We're only working 3 days. So, I'm curious, like, what advice do you have for those looking to scale to this without sacrificing their quality of life and like they're working these 3 days and like how to prioritize things? Because I think some might be thinking, how am I taking on client work in just 3 days?
Yeah, yeah. So it really comes down to when I talk to my clients, it comes down to how we structure their offers, because there are so many different types of offers that you can give, right? And there's also so many different price points. If you are someone who's undercharging, then you're going to find it extremely difficult to reach your monthly income goal of, let's say, 5K a month without working 5 or more days a week, because then you have to take on obviously lots and lots of clients to meet that goal. So something that I teach my students is how to create a super niche, which is revolved around not just niching down around who you target or what you sell, but really niching down around your unique approach and perspective. Because if you can build your offers and build your business around a unique approach that you have, or a unique perspective you have that isn't really the done thing in your industry, you're not only going to be able to stand out in a very saturated online world, but you're also going to be able to charge more for that. It's exactly like if somebody was creating a course on organizing your business and it was just for any online entrepreneur versus someone who made that course but specifically for interior designers, for instance. That person is often going to be able to not only stand out more and convert at a higher rate, but also charge more because they are based around a more specific niche. Or if you don't want to go like specifically for the who, then really narrow in on what makes your approach and perspective so unique. So for me in my business, it's the whole concept of 3-day work weeks, because that's not something that every other business coach has had much experience in. So yeah, that's one of the things I really, really put a lot of emphasis on with my clients and students, is if you can really nail down your super niche, your offers and your pricing, it goes a long way in helping you work less but earn more.
Yeah, such great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't have anything to add because I was just spot on. So I'll continue on. I have a couple more questions before we wrap up here. So I'm curious, with like all of the years that you've been in business and how you've gotten here, like what types of maybe challenges that you faced on this journey, like how did you overcome them, and sort of what takeaways? Because I think that sometimes our audience gets really scared to take action because they're scared of what we consider maybe failure or obstacles. And so I love to ask entrepreneurs, especially those who have been in business so long, is there, a challenge that you really feel like you grew from that you would be open to sharing on this podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a great question. I love that you ask all of your guests that. That's something I might have to ask my guests. I really love that question. I think so many of us like talk about the wins and the successes all the time. Like we forget that actually we've all gone through so many challenges. I would say for me, Probably one of the challenges I've definitely encountered a lot in the past goes back to what we were discussing earlier in the episode, was all about making time for content creation. I really, really struggled with this for a long time, and I found myself just getting caught up in that cycle of I'd create the content and then I wouldn't get the instant gratification. And then I would stop making the content and then I'd come back. And it was this just vicious cycle that got me nowhere. And I felt like it took me hours to create one post that didn't do much for my business, or it didn't feel like it did. And I think I share that challenge because I know that it's a challenge a lot of solopreneurs face, especially if you're new or you have a dead Instagram account or something that you just left and then came back to after some time. That was me at one point. And it can be like really disheartening, really discouraging. Um, and I always just like to remind myself, just in anything in life now that requires skill. If I'm new at it, I always like to remind myself that any skill is going to take me time to master at first, and I will get faster at it with time. Like I wouldn't pick up a guitar and after 3 months just expect myself to be an amazing guitarist that everybody loves. And like, it would take me a lot longer than that usually. I know that's something a lot of people don't want to hear, but it would take you time to get better and better and get faster at playing the songs. And so if you're someone listening right now who really struggles with content creation, and especially you find it like very time consuming, remind yourself first and foremost, it's going to take you time to become good at this. And it's going to take time for you to become faster at creating content. Then ask yourself, if I do want to do this more quickly, what am I spending the most time on? This is something I asked myself. Like, when I'm creating this content, what is it that is taking me the most time? Like, is it finding videos to post for my reels? Is it my own perfectionism? Like, what can I do to improve those things so that I can work more efficiently and faster? And if it is perfectionism, which for me it was, it's really helpful. I find this helpful a lot to this day. Like, it's really helpful to set a timer for 25 minutes and just tell yourself, that's the amount of time that I have for this task, that I have to create this piece of content or something else. And once that timer is up, that's it. I have to just go with what I've got and move on. And just remind yourself, it doesn't have to be perfect to be helpful. I found that if I reminded myself of that enough, over time, the perfectionism just grew quieter and quieter. So that's something that I struggled with big time, that I hope helps somebody else.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. And so, moving into my last and final question, this one I also ask everybody who comes on the podcast. How has starting your own business led to more freedom and fulfillment in your life?
It's led to more freedom traveling. I've been able to live abroad 4 times, travel to 18 countries,
Mm.
and I've been able to buy a houseboat, which is something I would never have been able to do before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's given me all of this freedom to to really pursue the things that I love and the things that
Mm.
I'm curious about. And
Yeah.
I'll never stop being grateful for the freedom that this business has given me to be able to do those things.
Yeah, I love that. So fun. I know you said that you were a boat builder, and I thought that's so
Yeah.
cool. Like, that's what I love too about the freedom filled lifestyle, is the hobbies that I get to indulge in and the things I never thought I could, bring to life. But having the time freedom and the money freedom to be able to do that has been so rewarding. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you for having me.
yeah, thank you so much for being here. And before I let you go, can you tell our audience where we can connect with you and learn more if we wanted to keep the conversation going?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, you can follow me on Instagram at Nesha Woolery, or my podcast, which is called The Simple Business Show. And I also have a free guidebook called How to Scale to 5 to 10K Months, working 3 days a week. So there's some points that we've touched on in this episode, and also quite a few more in that guidebook. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go ahead and download that as well.
Very cool. Awesome. I'll make sure everything is in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our audience for joining me for another episode of the Freedom Filled Life podcast. I'm your host, Shay, and I will see you in another episode. Bye for now.